Kabbalah for Heretics this Sunday when we study the works of Rabbi Nachman of Breslau, as we've been doing now for several years every Sunday. We come to entry 90 in Sichas Haran, where the Rebbe says, before each person goes to sleep, he sees the souls of all his dead relatives. Listen to that. People now mistake that for extraterrestrials. Do you see what I mean? But indeed, there is something for us to see in the dark before we go to sleep. And what that is are the archetypes projecting out on this thin beam of light from the eyes into the darkness where they take shape. We've talked about this a great deal in other talks. But in this case, the Rebbe is identifying them as dead relatives. What is within surrounds us. What is within surrounds us. And that's true of inner images as well. These are the archetypes. They are autonomous. We do not create them. They are self-created. And they are projecting out into the dark at night and taking various forms. I've given the example of my witnessing a set of keys while in an isolation tank with my eyes closed. I saw this set of golden keys, a ring of golden keys, and when I opened my eyes, I still saw the keys because they were being projected out. With my eyes closed, the projection was with my eyelids open, the projection went right out into the dark space surrounding me, and there I saw them, plain as anything. So the Rebbe says, before each person goes to sleep, he sees the souls of all his dead relatives. Now, he may not be aware of that because he may not be looking for them. But if one opens oneself to that, it is very probable and possible to see them. One also sees the souls of all who share his soul root. It is taught that when one dies, one sees all these souls. Now, among the Jews, and I know this firsthand, when one has a near-death experience, as my aunt did, my mother's sister, after delivering a baby when she was in her 40s, when one has a near-death experience, what happens is they see all their relatives coming to them to take them to the other side. And indeed, my aunt saw that, and it terrified her afterward when she came out of it. One also sees the souls of all who share his soul root, and it is taught that when one dies, one sees all these souls. Well, death, as the Rebbe is going to tell us, sleep is a small version of death. And so, before going to sleep, we see those souls as we would before we die. Sleep is 1/16 of death. Therefore, one also sees these souls before going to sleep. Notice this is very practical. This is very practical mysticism. You can look for them. When you go to sleep at night, if the lights are all out and it's totally dark, look for glowing images projecting out into the darkness. There's no guarantee you're going to see them, but many do, as the Rebbe is saying. And this is an illustration of how that thin beam of light radiates from the soul brain down through the optic nerve and out through the eyes into the environment surrounding us. Right now, at this very moment, we are all surrounded by various things. Television sets, automobiles, people, animals, they're all floating around us. We just don't see them because they're being kind of blotted out by the stronger light of the day. But when they enter into our brain system through the eyes, it's like those images that are floating around from a television projector. And they suddenly become apparent when you turn on the television set. The same is true with the mind. And then those images get projected out. Therefore, one also sees these souls before going to sleep. Again, I want to point out, many people report this experience, but they see it as a visitation from extraterrestrials, because that's what they are labeled now by the person seeing them. He says, the Rebbe goes on now, when you see these souls before retiring, you see them only vaguely and in passing. Think of it, that is true. If you're paying attention, you have to be looking for them. Even before death, there are many levels of seeing souls. A great tzaddik will see them very clearly, but the average person only sees them in passing, like a spark flashing before his eyes. Now again, the implication of that is, and I think if you stop and think about it, you've seen those sparks flashing before your eyes before going to sleep. The implication here is if you focus on them, they will come into fuller figure. A great tzaddik will see them very clearly, but the average person only sees them in passing, like a spark flashing before his eyes. Sleep is only 1/16 of death. The vision of those sparks is therefore only 1/16 of the flashing soul. It may only be subliminal and not actually sensed, but it exists at the very least in the unconscious. That's what we're being told. It may not come up out of the unconscious and project out into the outer environment around us, but it can and often does, particularly if one is looking for them and invites them. People are not aware of the vision before retiring because it is only 1/16 of the already before dying. But we're often unaware of that because it's only 1/16 of what is already very vague. It can be brought into consciousness much more clearly. Why do you think the Rebbe is telling us all this? What is the purpose of him telling us this? So that we can indeed bring those sparks into greater consciousness, visual consciousness. Why? Because that is what they are seeking. That is why they come to us as such visions, for us to bring them into fuller consciousness. They're seeking to come out of the dark of unconsciousness into the light of consciousness. When we do that, we restore them to their whole Rebbe's point of view. People are not aware of the vision before retiring because it is only 1/16 of the already vague vision that one has before death. But the truth is that every man shares this vision. Every man shares this vision. Those of you listening, and those of you here during the recording. We may not be conscious of it as we fall asleep, but the task is to become conscious of it, to become conscious of them, to bring them from out of the dark into the light before the ego vanishes. It's almost as if it's one last chance before sleep or death for the ego to bring those souls out of the darkness of the unconscious into the light where they seek to go of the conscious. He comes to now entry 91, which deals with a subject that we've all become over the years very familiar with, Lashon Hora. You may not be as aware of it as some other listeners. He says, if you want to study with continuous diligence, be careful never to speak against a fellow Jew. Never to speak against a fellow Jew. That's Lashon Hora. People have the hardest damn time understanding that. Over the years, I've had people saying, I don't do that, I don't do that, and then they're the very ones who leave the teachings in a great huff. Are you following me? Raise your hand if you're following me. We refuse to acknowledge that we gossip constantly about each other. And that is such an act of unconsciousness. That's such an act of ego domination and unconsciousness that we do it constantly and will claim otherwise when we're told that we do. Do you realize you talk about people here a lot when they're not here? Oh, no, I promise you I don't. When they do. This is why Lashon Hora is equated with death in the great works of the rabbis about evil speech. They equate gossip with death, killing people. They say gossip kills people. And indeed it does. I've seen it kill many people, great people, teachers. I've seen their careers destroyed by gossip. The good teacher is ever on the alert for that. Is ever on the alert for that. In himself as well as others. So we read the Rebbe warns us about this and says if you want to study with continuous diligence, be careful never to speak against a fellow Jew. By that he means anybody, really, but in particular a fellow Jew. But it does mean anybody. The act of speaking against someone when that person is not present is absolutely forbidden, because doing that itself is evil and can destroy the other person, and frequently does. When the bride is beautiful, love is perfect. But when the bride is blemished, love cannot be complete. The Torah is the bride. And if you're going to study the Torah, you must be unblemished by the sin of Lashon Hora, of speaking against a fellow person. Even actually, if you read the laws of Lashon Hora, even to speak well of them when they are not present is forbidden. And the reason is because even if you speak well of them when they're not present, that will sooner or later turn against them. Oh, the rabbi, he is so brilliant. You know, he teaches us such great stuff. Oh, hey, indeed he does. But you know, every now and then he screws up. Well, that's true. He sure does screw up. Look at yesterday when he said blah, blah, blah. Look how quickly it turned from praising him to condemning him. Evil speech. And that blemishes us for the study of the bride, the Torah. It is written, quote, Moses charged us with the Torah, a heritage for the congregation of Jacob. Notice it says the congregation of Jacob, not the sons and daughters of Jacob, but the congregation of Jacob, which is the entirety of the house of Israel, Gentile and Jew alike. Moses charged us with the Torah, a heritage for the congregation of Jacob. The Talmud says, do not read morashah, heritage, but meurashah, betrothed. Read a certain way, that word, heritage, can be read as meaning betrothed. The Torah, Moses gave us the Torah as our betrothed, quite literally, virtually. The Torah is our bride. Now you ask, are you saying that those 5 scrolls with all the do's and don'ts is our bride? No, that's not the Torah that the Kabbalah speaks of when he speaks of the Torah, or that the Zohar speaks of when it speaks of the Torah. When it says the Torah, when the Rebbe speaks of the Torah, he's talking about the hidden mystical Torah. Not the do's and don'ts, but the soul of God that is in the Torah, literally. It is that to which we become betrothed by Moses, giving it to us as our bride, as our groom. Every Jew is a letter in the Torah. Now he's being very specific. And unfortunately, this is part of Kabbalah, that there are things that are limited only to the children of Jacob, to the Jews. However, now listen to me carefully, those things become accessible to the non-Jew if and when the non-Jew enters the house of Israel. He then becomes a full partner in the birthright and the promises. Every Jew is a letter of the Torah. Do you mean to say that the Gentiles are not? Well, that's what it's saying. And by the way, that's what Paul says, that the Gentiles, because they're not Jews, are not privileged to the blessings of the Torah. They're not a letter of the Torah, except that Yeshua bar Miriam came, the Messiah came, to include them, to make them one with the Jews, within the house of Israel, that is his own person. So that even though this particular thing is talking about specifically the Jews, it is possible for the non-Jew to enter into that status. It's called being a Noahite. It doesn't mean converting to the religion of Judaism. That's not the point. It means entering into the house of Israel, to become full members of the house of Israel. And, in that sense, a Jew. The Talmud says, do not read Morasha, heritage, but Meurasha, the betrothed. Moses charged us with the Torah, the betrothed of the congregation of Jacob. See, it goes from Jew to congregation. Everyone within the congregation of Jacob, within the house of Israel, the house of Jacob, everyone, Jew and Gentile, they're all open to these blessings. If there is a defect in a single Jew, it is also a blemish on the Torah. Now this is very specific. A blemish on the Gentile Noahite is not necessarily as great a blemish on the Torah as the blemish on the Jew. Why? Because Jesus says it. Salvation comes from the Jews. And if the Jews are blemished, that salvation will be blemished. But if you are careful not to speak against any Jew, then you will also find the Torah perfectly beautiful. But if you are careful not to speak against any Jew, then you will also find the Torah perfectly beautiful. We've all, in the course of our learning together, experienced such people who do speak against the Torah, against me personally, or the teachings. They do, all the while claiming they do not. And that is being forbidden. What they're doing by doing that is sullying the Torah, a great sin. If each individual in the house of Israel, Jew and Gentile, is the Torah, to speak evil speech against that individual is to blemish the Torah itself. I hope you're following. We've seen that. It is written in Psalms, God's Torah is perfect. It restores the soul. Each member of the house of Israel represents a letter in the Torah. When people neither seek out nor speak of the flaws in their fellow members of the house of Israel, then the Torah is perfect, with neither flaw nor blemish. I hope you're all hearing that, and I hope you're hearing that clear as a bell. I hope you're hearing. When a person speaks evil speech against another person, and against another member of the house of Israel, they're not just attacking that person, they are attacking and blemishing the Torah itself, because each person is a letter of the Torah, is the Torah itself. Each person in the house of Israel, whether by birth or by adoption, is a letter of the Torah. When you speak against that person, you are speaking against the Torah. You are blemishing the Torah. God help you. Well, I'll stop here for this morning. We'll continue, of course. We'll continue next Sunday. But for now, let me mark my place, and we will continue with our broadcast next Sunday on the wisdom of Rabbi Nachman of Breslau. In the meantime, those of you who are attending this recording session, do you have any questions? Raise your hand if you do, or comments. Those of you who are listening, thank you for listening. Make it a habit to listen every day. Kabbalah for Heretics is broadcast every day on YouTube, so try to make it a habit to listen to us. You can listen throughout the day. It doesn't have to be at a particular time. Or if you want to ask questions of me or discuss something with me after the class, after the broadcast is finished, then come to the actual recording session, and you'll be able to talk to me after the broadcast is complete. In the meantime, see you tomorrow when we broadcast our program on the Zohar. We resume our weekday morning broadcasts of the Zohar tomorrow morning, and hope to have you listening then, or if you wish to talk to me personally, come and attend the recording session. Oh, someone here has made a comment. If people are careful not to speak against another person or someone in the house of Israel, then the Torah is perfect. Each person in the house of Israel is a letter of the Torah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, David. That's a great summary of the teaching this morning. Thank you. All right, everybody. See you tomorrow morning's broadcast. We actually broadcast it at 8:15 a.m. Eastern Time. You can listen anytime throughout the day, but we do the actual recording of the program 8:15 a.m. Eastern Time here on Pal Talk. So hopefully we'll see you then. If not, hopefully you'll listen. Be well.